I mean, someone like Chris Brown he got a lot to lose.
I mean, but Chris Brown ain't in it. He just affiliated. He not in the streets putting in no work.
The only thing about it that bothers me is that they don't know what they really getting into or could be getting into.
I'm a Crip, hell yeah, bulletproof. Hey. Yeah, I love you, Chris. You my don't act like that.
Rich and start fighting people. I mean, it makes no sense to me.
Chris Brown has been living the dream of fame and success since he was a teenager. He's hailed as one of the most prominent artists in R&B music, even getting credited for evolving the genre.
When did you know, when you were younger, this is really what you wanted to do, man?
I knew ever since I was 2, I always was dancing, performing.
Some folks call him the king of R&B. His singing and dancing skills have drawn comparisons to the legendary Michael Jackson.
The only person, in my opinion, that could have achieved just as great as a legacy as Mike, to me, would have been Chris Brown.
But despite all the fame and accolades, Chris has this strange obsession with gang culture and trying to portray a gang background that he never really had.
Hello. We in here. We in here, nigga. Yeah, he count money. He busy right now. We lit. Big movies, big movies, big movies. They got me in all right tonight.
It's a weird twist because unlike many artists who come from that life and try to leave it behind, Chris seems to have been drawn to gangs in a way that doesn't quite fit his background.
They got me in all right tonight.
Interestingly, Chris dropped a video for his song Don't Think They Know, which had a powerful message against gang violence. The video was shot in black and white with flashes of red and blue, representing the Crips and Bloods, aiming to highlight the brutal realities of gang violence. It seemed like Chris was using his platform to promote peace and unity, but then he did a complete 180 and started hanging out with gang members and flashing gang signs affiliated with the Bloods.
St. Louis was popping.
Blood, a whole lot of gangster shit.
This behavior has made a lot of people see him as irresponsible. It's puzzling for many, especially considering Chris grew up in Virginia, far from the gang culture of LA, and decided to embrace these gangs in his mid-20s. This happened even after he worked hard to clean up his image following the infamous Rihanna incident. The whole situation gets even messier when you consider that even the OGs of the Bloods and Crips have called him out several times.
I mean, someone like Chris Brown he got a lot to lose.
I mean, but Chris Brown ain't in it. He just affiliated. He not in the streets putting in no work.
This shows that these hardcore gang members don't respect Chris Brown at all. Sure, he might get some attention from them and they might let him use their signs, but in reality, no true OG respects Chris.
Motherfucker, room. Time out, hey, man. You ain't from the hood, none. You ain't came to the hood, none. You ain't did nothing, none. Stop it, nigga. Stop it, man. Stop flexing, nigga. Hey, we really from the hood, though.
He might be bringing in publicity, reputation, and money, but he's treading on thin ice. The gang world is real and dangerous, and a lot of people have lost their lives because of it. If Chris says the wrong thing or finds himself in the wrong neighborhood, he could be in serious trouble.
The only thing about it that bothers me is that they don't know what they really getting into or could be getting into.
So what's up with Chris and his obsession with gang culture? Let's dive deeper into this. Chris Brown was born in 1989 in Tappahannock, Virginia, a place known for its above-average crime rate. Interestingly, Chris wasn't really exposed to gangs and their culture during his early years. In fact, he found success at an age when many might have been drawn into such activities. His big break came when talent scouts happened to visit a gas station owned by his father. Within months, Chris was recording demos in New York and soon signed with Jive Records. Even back then, his talent was undeniable and many saw him as a potential successor to Michael Jackson thanks to his impressive singing and dancing skills. Chris was also deeply into hip-hop culture, but his label had other plans. They persuaded him to steer clear of rapping, wanting to market him strictly as an R&B artist. Not only did he have to abandon rapping, but he also had to adopt a squeaky clean image, which meant letting go of his affinity for hip-hop. Despite this, his self-titled debut album in 2005 was a massive hit, entering the Billboard 200 at number 2 and producing hits like Run It and Gimme That.
What it is, folks.
By 2007, Chris was opening for Beyoncé on tour, making appearances on shows like MTV's My Super Sweet 16, renamed Chris Brown My Super 18 for his episode, and releasing his second album, Exclusive. This album included smash hits like Kiss Kiss and Wall to Wall, showcasing his ability to blend R&B with the auto-tuned pop-leaning hip-hop of the time. His breakout moment, however, came at the 2007 MTV Video Music Awards, where he delivered a show-stopping performance that included a brief interlude of Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. The performance even featured a cameo from Rihanna, who joined him on stage for her hit Umbrella. Their chemistry was undeniable, though they kept their relationship mostly under wraps. However, this love story took a dark turn a year and a half later. The night before the 2009 Grammy Awards, a brutal argument broke out between Chris and Rihanna in his rented Lamborghini. The fight began when Rihanna discovered a text message from a woman Chris had been involved with. According to the police report, Chris hit Rihanna's head against the car window, punched and choked her, bit her ear, and even threatened to K-word her. Both were set to perform at the Grammys the next day, but understandably canceled. The photo of Rihanna's battered face became unavoidable in the media, and Chris's once pristine public image was shattered overnight.
Fashion star. And then one night, her equally famous boyfriend, Chris Brown, beat her so badly, the whole world was shocked to discover there was a secret life.
After the incident, Chris says he was so distraught that he considered suicide and didn't leave his house for 3 months. At a hearing in March of 2009, he expressed deep remorse, saying, "Words cannot begin to express how sorry and saddened I am for what transpired."
I'm really sorry for what went down and what happened.
3 months later, he pled guilty to felony assault, resulting in a plea deal that included 5 years of probation, 1,400 hours of community service, and a domestic abuse program. A report obtained by CNN during his sentencing revealed 2 previous incidents of domestic violence between Chris and Rihanna, one in Europe and another in Barbados. During this difficult period, Rihanna made several appearances at Chris's hearings. She later said, "I felt like he made that mistake because he needed help. Initially, it seemed like Chris was on a swift path to redemption." At his first probation hearing, the judge praised him for his community service and counseling efforts and allowed him to travel overseas for concerts. His subsequent hearings were also positive, and eventually the judge lifted the restraining order preventing him from contacting Rihanna. They even began seeing each other off and on again during this time. But things started getting pretty wild for Chris Brown, with his temper tantrums and angry outbursts becoming a significant part of his public image. In March of 2011, during an appearance on Good Morning America, he lost his cool big time. Host Robin Roberts kept asking him about the Rihanna incident, and Chris wasn't having it. He stormed off to his dressing room, punched a window until it cracked, and then strutted out into the street shirtless.
Staff called security because they heard loud noises coming from Brown's dressing room. A window in Brown's dressing room was smashed, and that caused shattered glass to fall onto the street below in Times Square.
And all this happened when he was supposed to be promoting his album Fame, which he said stood for both Forgiving All My Enemies and Fans Are My Everything. Despite the drama, the album was a hit and even won the 2012 Grammy for Best R&B Album. Just a few months later, in June of 2012, things escalated when Chris and his crew got into a nasty brawl with Drake and his entourage at a New York club. The whole thing reportedly kicked off after Chris sent Drake a bottle of champagne as a peace offering. Drake, who had been romantically linked with Rihanna, supposedly sent back a note that read, "I'm effing the love of your life," which obviously didn't sit well with Chris. The fight left several people injured and the club in chaos.
When I think I caught a bottle coming by, like going this way, and then a whole bunch of bottles coming back to this way.
Fast forward to January 2013, Chris was back in the headlines, this time accused of punching and threatening to shoot singer Frank Ocean at a LA recording studio. Just a month later, Chris totaled his Porsche after being chased by paparazzi. It didn't stop there. He was also accused of punching a woman at a nightclub. Despite these accusations, no charges were filed. The roller coaster continued in October of 2013 when Chris and his bodyguard were accused of assaulting a man in DC after the man photobombed a picture Crip Chris was taking with a fan. Chris allegedly punched the guy in the face and ended up spending the night in jail. Shortly after, he checked into rehab, but his stay was cut short after he reportedly smashed his mom's car window following a therapy session. Chris moved to another rehab facility where he seemed to be doing better after they switched his medication. It was during this time that he was diagnosed with bipolar II disorder, which is characterized by depressive and hypomanic episodes. In March 2014, things took another turn when he was sent to jail for violating his probation after being kicked out of rehab. Chris claimed it was a setup, but he was ordered to serve 131 days in county jail.
Over 230 days, some odd days credit on a 365, and generally the sheriff is releasing on a lot less than that. But it's up to the sheriff, obviously.
To avoid trouble with other inmates, he spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. On June 2, 2014, Chris got an early release. He kissed the ground outside the jail and made a beeline for Burger King. Later on, Chris Brown would look back on his time in prison and talk about how much it changed him. He said he was working on being more mature, leaving violence behind, and how therapy had really helped him.
It was a humbling experience for me to become a man and mature.
Do you believe in therapy? Do you think it works?
Absolutely, I believe in therapy. I see my therapist twice a week. You know, it's amazing.
However, despite his best intentions, his run-ins with the law just kept getting worse. But there was one thing that stood out about Chris: his obsession with gangs. In 2013, Chris found himself in a pretty scary situation at a Hollywood nightclub. A guy who claimed to be a member of the Crips started threatening him. This guy hurled a bunch of expletives at Chris and asked if his Lamborghini was bulletproof, making it clear he was a full-fledged gang member. Chris, knowing the dangers of escalating the situation, chose to keep his cool and not engage. He later told TMZ, "It's LA, brother, you just gotta keep your head down and keep walking." Despite these threats, Chris tried to use his influence for good. In June of that year, he released a video for his song Don't Think They Know, which carried a strong message against gang violence. The video opens with the words, "Every 2 hours in America today, a child dies of a gunshot wound, and unity is what we're afraid of, so fear is insanity, let's love each other." The video, shot in black and white with flashes of red and blue to represent the Crips and Bloods, aimed to highlight the harsh realities of gang violence. Chris explained, quote, "When I did the video, I wanted to do kinda like the Boys in the Hood theme, also bringing an aspect of the side of the world that people never really talk about anymore. Gun violence or stuff that we deal with in our neighborhood or community that we could just stop." This message was powerful and appreciated considering Chris's huge platform and influence. But a few months later, Chris did something that seemed to contradict his anti-violence stance. In August of 2013, while in Hawaii, he spray-painted some graffiti that read Fruits Piru, a reference to the Fruittown Piru gang, which is affiliated with the Bloods. This action raised a lot of eyebrows and led to criticism. The following year at the BET Awards, Chris once again appeared to show support for the Bloods. At an after-party, he was seen flashing gang signs. This move sparked even more backlash. People found it puzzling that Chris, who grew up in Virginia far from the gang culture of LA, decided to embrace these gangs in his mid-20s, especially after working hard to clean up his image following the Rihanna incident. In an interview with Vlad TV, rapper and Crips member Trey D expressed his bewilderment over Chris Brown and others joining gangs after achieving success. He remarked, "It has to either be a psychological defect where you don't want to enjoy your life and wealth and, ride around on boats." He continued, "I see it as a peer pressure aspect. Is this what you really want for yourself, or do you feel like this is the only way you'll be secure in certain areas? So are you buying in for protection? That's the only logical conclusion I can come to." Chris Brown's public display of gang signs led many to believe he had joined the Bloods. Normally, flashing gang signs without being a member would be unwise and likely provoke a response. However, a Bloods member clarified that while Chris Brown wasn't officially a member, they didn't mind him using the signs. This gang member provided 4 specific reasons why Chris Brown was permitted to make these gestures. Quote, "He's hired several of them to work for him, giving their Compton community an economic boost. Chris came to the hood and hangs out with them. He shot a music video in the neighborhood and even included some of them in the video, and he donated 1,000 pairs of new shoes to Compton kids." While it's easy to criticize Chris Brown, these actions show he cares about people in poor neighborhoods in LA, which is more than can be said for many other celebrities living there. But does this mean he needs to rep the gang as well? The idea that Chris Brown might be using the Bloods for protection is intriguing. On the surface, it makes some sense, but Charlemagne the God has argued that artists who do this are essentially being extorted. In another Vlad TV interview, he said, "You're really paying for protection when you can just pay for protection in the legal way. Why put yourself in the mix of that?"
It makes no sense. Now you just out here getting extorted. You in LA getting extorted. Let's call it what it is. Like, a lot of these guys are just out in LA getting extorted. That's it.
This raises questions about why Chris Brown is so obsessed with gangs. Interestingly, Chris Brown isn't the only one who seems to have fallen into this pattern. Rapper Bow Wow has faced similar criticism. Born in 1989 and 1987 respectively, Chris Brown and Bow Wow's earliest memories of hip-hop coincide with the golden age of hip-hop and the height of gangsta rap. Vlad pointed out that they grew up on Death Row, Snoop, and the Dogg Pound and have sort of been enamored with that gang culture because of the music. Charlemagne the God sees this as a naive viewpoint, saying, quote, "Salute to all the real Bloods and Crips out there who probably had no other choice because it was a thing in their community or family, but these guys who have totally other options, who didn't grow up around that all, you're entertainers." Bow Wows to Chris Brown, stop it.
Well, if I was them, I'd be upset. I'd be like, yo, y'all representing us wrong. Stop it. Chris Brown, stop doing that shit on social media. Bow Wow, stop that shit. Stop misrepresenting us.
In September 2014, Chris Brown sat down with Sway for an interview where the topic of potential gang affiliations came up. Chris Brown brushed it off, saying that it's just part of the territory when you're living in LA and involved in the hip-hop industry. He explained, when you're in LA and you're around people, you meet everybody. You meet Crips, you meet Bloods, especially in this industry that I'm in. I'm not in the country world, I'm not in the all-the-way pop world. When you're in hip-hop, all of that meshes. Fast forward 2 years to 2016 and Chris was back in the spotlight for a different reason. This time it was for a bizarre Instagram rant where he called out people for pretending to be part of gangs. A bit ironic considering he had been accused of the same thing. In his now deleted post, he vented, "So many fake gang members these days, they get in the industry and the next thing you know they got a blue rag or a red rag. Ain't been through nothing, out of town dudes kill me with this stuff. You're not a Blood or a Crip just because you know a dude from that hood and you bought a blue or red rag from the dollar store. Stop faking the funk, y'all not bout that. Blue Bloods and Red Crips is what I'ma call you imposters." With all this drama and controversy, it's easy to forget that Chris Brown has had an incredibly successful music career. He's sold over 140 million records worldwide, making him one of the world's best-selling music artists. He has a dedicated fan base and is one of the highest-grossing African-American touring artists of all time. Brown holds the record for the most Billboard Hot 100 entries of any male singer in history, the most top 40 hits of any R&B singer in history, the most RIAA Gold certified singles of any male singer in history, and the most RIAA multi-platinum singles of any male singer in history. In 2019, Billboard named him the third most successful artist of the 2010s decade in R&B and hip-hop music, right behind Drake and Rihanna. He's won 202 awards from 513 nominations and even pursued an acting career, appearing in films like Stomp the Yard, This Christmas, Takers, Think Like a Man, and Battle of the Year. Brown's dancing abilities and stage presence are also widely praised. People often compare his dancing skills to Michael Jackson's. Brown himself said he learned to dance by copying Jackson's moves as a kid and then developed his own unique style as he grew up. He also looked up to MC Hammer for inspiration. Most of his music videos are packed with complex choreographies. For example, the video for Turn Up the Music has a cool futuristic vibe, while Fine China pays homage to Jackson's style. In Zero, he mixes it up with different dance styles, including popping and his signature spin move. Party shows off his impressive footwork, and Heat features silky smooth choreography that really highlights his unmatched dancing talent. Some of Chris Brown's most memorable live performances include his recreation of Michael Jackson's Thriller at the '06 World Music Awards, and his epic medley at the 2011 MTV Video Music Awards, where he even flew during the performance. In 2015, he freestyled to Future's March Madness at Festival in The Hague, which included an impressive front flip that wowed the crowd. Besides his music and dance, Chris is also a talented graffiti artist. His visual artwork is described as manga-inspired and abstract. Brown has been painting since he was a kid, starting with school walls. He loves how drawing and painting let him express himself in unique ways, sharing his own perspective with the world. Under the pseudonym Confused, Chris has teamed up with street artist Kai to create pieces for the Miami Basil. He's painted buildings for radio stations like Hot 97, and in 2015, 2015 worked on the walls of the Grammy Museum, blending spray paint drawings with images of legends like James Brown, Prince, and Michael Jackson alongside himself. Chris's graffiti can be found in cities around the world, including Los Angeles, London, and Amsterdam. In a cool project with Spotify's Rap Caviar, Chris combined his painting and dancing skills to create the cover art for his album Heartbreak on a Full Moon, dancing around the canvas as he painted. In 2020, he painted a mural in memory of Kobe Bryant, which features Kobe's face, a mamba, and a few action shots of Kobe dribbling and dunking a basketball. But despite all these accomplishments, Chris Brown has not quite hit the astronomical heights that many envisioned for him when he burst onto the scene at just 15 years old. He has not become the next Michael Jackson, and none of his albums have reached the iconic status of Thriller or Off the Wall. There's no shame in that. Michael Jackson set an almost impossibly high bar, but fellow artist Akon believes that Chris Brown had the potential to reach those heights. In a 2022 interview, Akon said, quote, "In this day and age, the only person in my opinion that could have achieved just as great of a legacy as Michael Jackson would have been Chris Brown. I just believe that Chris Brown wasn't surrounded by the circle of creative people that Mike was surrounded by. Because Chris got the talent, he just needed the direction."
In this day and age, the only person, in my opinion, that could have achieved just as great as a legacy as Mike, to me, would have been Chris Brown.
Akon went on to imagine what Chris Brown's career could have looked like if he had Michael Jackson's team behind him. So imagine if Chris had Mike's team. Just imagine that. But Chris, he got Bloods around him. He got little gangbangers around him. He don't have the guidance. He's smart, but he's smart in what this generation attracts.
Imagine if Chris had Mike's team.
Right.
Just imagine that. It would be something different.
And that's big.
But Chris is like he got Bloods around him. He got little gangbangers around him.
Even diehard Chris Brown fans might agree that he has not fully realized his potential. Some might argue that the Rihanna incident played a role in this, and there's definitely a case to be made that it helped propel her career while his own actions held his back. But it's also true that it's hard to become the next Michael Jackson when you're heavily gang affiliated and throwing up gang signs.